Hi there, everybody. This is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and I'm here today with my friend Chris Stiles, who is a human futurist. How are you doing, Chris?
Hello, John. Always great to be on the channel with you, and always lovely to talk about developments in the research that I've been doing and see how it can actually help people and wake them up.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we've been pursuing some very new paths in very recent times. Discovering light technology, advanced geometrics, and various other things that are going on, and the crystal children that are coming. So many things happening on the platform, on the planet right now, and it's just very deliberate. This is part of a process, and I know that the research that you do is a very specific. Like we're kind of like more scattergun, trying to cover all various things, whereas you are very, very focused. So, I mean, do you want to start off by just giving us a quick overview of what you do, how you've done it, and a brief evolution of that, and then we'll get into where this is developing.
Absolutely, John. I began a journey of self-discovery back in 2010 on the back of a catastrophic personal collapse that I experienced. And I was trying to make sense of this because it just made no sense to me how everything could just suddenly go so wrong and on the quantum that it happened. Now, being a trained scientist with a father who was a mathematician, obviously, I have, if you will, been conditioned to think in a very logical, integrated, mathematical 1 + 1 = 2 meat and potatoes way.
Hmm.
And I think this is, in many ways, why the journey I've been on, the work that I am producing, the fact that it has got such fantastically interesting spiritual insights, yet it is really thoroughly grounded in research, numbers, mathematics, and most importantly, John, repeatable patterns. So they always say, can you repeat this? Can you repeat this?
Yeah.
Can you repeat this? Because to the very skeptical, even closed mind, it's a question of when you're able to repeat something, you've moved from, if I can put it, the woo-woo world into the world of repetition, of logic, and of evidence. I think that's the big word, evidence. And so this is the world that I then began to move in. And I co hosted a talk radio show back in South Africa for about close on 3 years, where we interviewed many of the world's leading authorities on personal development, business success. And of course, everybody's giving their own vanilla recipe around if you do this my way, you'll become rich or whatever. You know the typical
Yeah, yeah.
sellathons that go on out there. The really interesting thing, John, is this just it was too vanilla for me.
Hmm.
And I'm in this regard, I'm always very grateful to my dad, who was a very tough taskmaster. But he always used to say to me, you can chat to me about anything as long as you can substantiate it with numbers and facts,
Yeah.
and that you can repeat it, because obviously he was logic personified, being a mathematician and a physicist. And I looked at everything and it was just too vanilla, if I
Yeah.
could put it like this, spending vast amounts of money on these self-development programs, yet the program is tailored for everybody. And how can I be you and you be me?
Yeah.
We're completely different. All you've got to do is just look at our thumbprint and you realize how different we are. So how is the same program going to work for both of us and make both of us rich by following this, given the fact that we could be in completely different places in our life? In fact, that is not a probability or a possibility, it's a guaranteed.
Yeah.
So this made no sense, John, and so began a journey of really searching for something that would start to make sense to me in terms of how I could begin to unpack an individual in such a way that I could really understand them, and in such a way that whatever intervention is being designed around that person, whether it be coaching, whatever, actually is landing into exactly where they are at that moment in time in their life. Therefore, you move completely away from vanilla solutions into bespoke solutions, highly tailored, highly organized solutions. John, this journey took me down many different avenues, trying to understand myself better. I went down so many different rabbit holes, basically to discover nothing and have to burrow my way back up again and start all over again. And then finally, um, I was gifted by Suzanne the first layer, which was provided by a Princeton mathematician who tragically, when I discovered this, was no longer with us.
Mm.
But what this Princeton mathematician had begun to do was work with numbers in terms of assembling them in such a way that he believed he was presenting what could be a fairly robust structure or skeleton through which life was being experienced,
Mm.
right? And this really, really, really got me going. Because the one thing that I found with numbers is that, one is one, two is two, three is three, etc., etc. Yes, you can assign certain characteristics with them, but the bottom line is you're dealing with the same number.
Yeah.
For example, where I used to get really confused when I went into astrology, and it's not to say that there's not an enormous amount of information available in astrology, but for example, at the moment, if you speak to a Vedic astrologer, a sidereal Vedic astrologer, they will tell you that earlier this year, Uranus moved into Taurus.
Right.
Whereas if you are talking to a tropical astrologer, they will say that earlier this year, Uranus moved into Gemini.
Mm.
Now, the thing is, as someone whose entire life has been science, logic, minutia, black and white, and proof-driven evidence, that really used to spin my head, because how can one astrologer be speaking this and another astrologer be speaking that? Where is the truth? So the whole purpose of this, John, was truth seeking.
Yeah.
Anyway, a hell of a journey, John, a hell of a journey. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, many, many, many failed case studies and efforts until finally I cracked what I called the beginning of an intelligent mathematical blueprint. Now that was work which started to really take shape, and by virtue of insights that I was given, I started to model in different dimensions. I started to integrate the shadow, if you will, if you think about Carl Jung, the shadow and shadow numbers. And all of a sudden, I realized, wow, I've really cracked something. And I knew that because when I finally built the architecture of my life and I looked at it, I could suddenly see things that literally caused the hair on the back of my neck to stand up. And I thought to myself, what on earth have I actually produced here? Because this is real serious evidence. As you will remember, John, I think it was in about 2019 that I built your intelligent mathematical blueprint.
I think it was maybe just a little bit after that, but yeah, I do. I remember it well.
2019, 2020. Now, John, if I can put it, the work then was
Mm.
literally the equivalent of being in its baby shoes.
Yeah.
And still, when I presented it to you, you were absolutely blown away, and you said, "I've never seen anything like this."
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, the wonderful thing, John, is that the work has evolved non-stop since then, and at such a rate that I am now, when I am looking at an individual and developing, if you will, the mathematical matrix of numbers that define and theme and influence the construct of this person's life. I am now working in at the moment, the information I'm producing, which is more than enough to completely blow people's minds, is in 9 dimensions.
Mm, mm,
I can explode that into 18, and I can explode that further into 27.
mm.
But the thing is that that actually becomes death by detail because,
Yeah.
not being funny, John, the first time you try and explain it to somebody, if you're working in 27 dimensions, they can't get it.
Mm-mm.
So 9 dimensions is more than enough. And you know, John, it comes back to a moment that I had on a farm back in South Africa. And I kept on having a vision. And the vision that I had was of cogs that were
Mm.
turning, different size cogs that were turning at different speeds. Now, instead of the cogs having teeth, where you would have a tooth of the cog, there was a number. So you've just
Right.
got this whirling mass, a swirling mass of numbers. And I would see this clearly, and then all of a sudden, it's literally like everything would start to slow down, and you would see organizations starting to appear in these numbers, and then suddenly a string of numbers would appear where they were all the same,
Mm,
and then it would start to mix itself up again.
mm,
And I had no idea what I was seeing. I mean, you know, let alone even discuss what I was seeing with people because they would have thought you're absolutely barking mad. But this was happening again and again and again. It was the only way I can put it, John, is it was literally like something out there
mm.
was trying to get a message through to me down here in a way that would make perfect sense and align with how I have been conditioned or programmed, and therefore allow me to work with that and experiment with it and play it and research it and develop it.
Yeah.
And this led into these mathematical blueprints just becoming more and more and more involved, more and more accurate. Gosh, John, when I look back at the stuff that I was building in 2017, 2018, 2019, I look at it and I think, heavens alive, that was so basic. It's literally like looking at a horse and cart, and now you're sitting tweaking a Formula One car.
Mm, mm.
But the thing is, even back then, it carried such accuracy. It's just that now it has become laser accurate. And John, over time, with systemic breakthroughs that happen as a result of persistence,
Mm,
that's what I do, John. I play.
mm,
I take an idea, I take a set of numbers, and I play with them. And sometimes absolutely nothing happens. I might play for hundreds of hours, and then all of a sudden there's some breakthrough, and it's like, gosh, I have got it. And every time I know I've got it, when I go and test it, it's laser accurate.
mm, mm.
And the work has evolved to the point now where, John, even work that I was doing for clients a couple of years back, they will contact me now and say, goodness gracious, remember what you were talking about 3, 4 years back? You were saying this experience was coming, or this could be on its way, or this would be the end of my life that was gifted. Well, it's bullseye, it's laser accurate. And
Mm.
I guess, John, the reason I'm always very grateful to you and to Jolene and to Elevated Planet is you provide a platform for me through which I can actually share my ever evolving, ever improving, and if I can put it, becoming ever more accurate research, which is really, really numbers, maths, patterns, sequences, codes, research, and evidence driven. So it's real meat and potato stuff. Yep. With your audience, and then start to take this, if I can put it, this meat and potatoes, and then flesh it out with you into something that is more esoteric in order to open people's minds to a bigger picture. And that's basically what we're going to be doing on this chat.
Yeah, yeah, and I do very much remember, when we first went through that mathematical blueprint, intelligent mathematical blueprint, and yeah, absolutely, is blown away. And then we tended to come to you every time we had an important decision to make, including what were we going to call Elevated Planet? Well, we're going to call it Elevated Planet. It was like the whole process of winding down what I'd created before because that wasn't going to work. But this was the right energy. This was the right numerical sequences that started on the right date. Everything was aligned to move in the direction it was set. But that's the thing. I do know that with you, it is kind of that scientific background and the scientific rigor that is applied to everything is absolute, and I totally get it because to me, when we're talking about our variety of subjects, as we do on Elevated Planet, a lot of which are not provable. Okay, they're actually just, they are you know it to be true here, right? But your skeptics are going to turn around and say, okay, so you know it to be true there. Well, there you go. That's good, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. That's where you come in and are able to kind of blow people's minds again by presenting them with data that makes absolute sense. Okay, this year's something, because this is what I remember is you go back to certain dates and certain years, which were when things changed big time for me. And you
Yep.
could see it was always in the coding that there was going to be a big change at that point, which means
Yep.
that when you look forward into 3 years' time, you say, oh, yeah, you've got another event of those coming up in 3 years' time. Oh, okay, right. Now then, is that going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is it doesn't tell you what's going to happen, but it shows you what the energetics are going to be around that, right? So, and I'm fascinated because, I mean, obviously there is so much going on in the world right now. So many things are changing. So to be able to have your overview of how you're seeing things unfold in your world is really very fascinating.
Well, John, thank you. And I think one of the greatest advancements that I have made of late, and I'm talking about the last 12 to 18 months, in the integrated mathematical modeling work that I do, is to be able to introduce risk indicators.
Right.
Now, this was something that I wasn't even working on this level when I built yours back in 2019. And as we'll see shortly, um, I now know and understand how to run calculations around numbers. And for example, John, you will have certain numbers that are unique to you, which carry a higher than average risk.
Hmm.
Okay. The moment I understand that, I then take that baseline intelligence, I integrate it into this construct, if you will, this matrix or this grid of numbers that I then create, which are completely unique to you. And I then introduce series of red blocks where these specific numbers come into play. And suddenly you can start to see the most amazing things and moments of tremendous risk suddenly pop. And it's like, goodness gracious me. And every single time a coconut, this is
Yeah.
laser accurate. John, and again, I just think it's so important to say that everything that I do, everything that I present, everything that I share with you has been literally researched to death.
Hmm.
And an enormous body of evidence assimilated. So when I'm talking about stuff, I'm not talking about three or four or five or six case studies. I'm talking about hundreds, possibly even thousands. That's why I can say categorically, I have been at this. I mean, forget $10,000. That's a small figure in
Hmm.
terms of the amount that I've invested into it. And it just opens your mind up and it just makes you realize that we are so much more than what we can begin to fathom. Your name, John Drew. Yes, you are John Drew, but you are so much more than John Drew. Chris Styles, etc., etc. And the most amazing thing for me, John, through this integrated mathematical approach that I have developed around understanding and really understanding the human journey on a bespoke individual level, it's just knocked so much other stuff out the park.
Mm,
And it really, in so many ways, um, targets, this simulation thinking. Are we actually living in a simulation?
mm,
How much control do we really have over our lives, etc., etc., etc. And I publish extensively about this on LinkedIn, as you well know, John.
yeah.
I use LinkedIn because it's a professional platform. It might not necessarily be the right platform, but I publish extensively on LinkedIn because the thing is, that's the audience that I'm actually trying to um, interest or intrigue. Because, strangely enough, I find in many ways that is the audience whose minds are the most shut.
Yes. Yes, I would agree with that.
And John, as someone who's incredibly curious, I mean, I'm curious about absolutely everything. And before I began this journey to try to understand or make sense or unpack the spiritual quotient of life mathematically, as you well know, I spent many, many years in banking, many years in finance, and there in executive and leadership positions, what is demanded of you, IQ and EQ. And of course, the I well, if you haven't got the IQ, that dog's not going to hunt. And then the EQ, that you have all these coaches around you trying to develop that, and you also make an effort to develop it yourself. But you never ever heard anybody talking about the spiritual quotient. Never,
Mm,
never at all.
mm,
That just the moment you went there, it was too woo-woo.
yeah.
It was just like, no, 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 no. Now you're going into stuff that just makes the hair on everybody's neck stand up. And that to me was such a huge gap,
Mm,
because the thing is, that's the gap that needs to be closed. It's not that people in the C-suite of businesses would not be open to the what you and I are talking about. It's the fact that if you walk in there and you start talking to them about stuff that is so far out there that they're not even going to make that connection.
mm,
They need to make a connection around a spiritual quotient and the existence of a spiritual quotient in their dimension first, where they're comfortable, which is the meat and potatoes dimension, the numbers dimension. Once they've made that connection, and if you've blown them away, which has happened with every CEO that I've ever worked with, they will then sit there and scratch their heads and say, whoa, what on earth am I looking at here? Now you have begun to prepare or lay the groundwork for a journey. But if you just go straight out, as you say, into the Z's and channeling and remote viewing, these guys, it's like, no, forget it. I'm out of here.
mm. Yeah. But in a strange kind of way, channeling is what you were doing, right? Aren't you? That's the bottom
Of
line.
course.
Yeah. So
Of course
so
it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
of
the
course
thing.
it is.
An artist and a musician, like when you get high quality artists and musicians, you ask them, they'll say, oh, their best pieces of work are when they're very unconscious about what they're doing, right? And it just comes through. And it's the same thing with you as a mathematician, right? You are kind of getting these downloads, right? And these are kind of leading the way. This is, undoubtedly, I still, in my world, I believe it's part of you. It's like a higher self kind of thing saying, okay, like you're now ready for your next download. Now you're ready for the next one. So,
John, you've absolutely nailed it. I absolutely do channel. Um, the interesting thing is every single breakthrough that I've ever had, which has completely transformed the intelligent mathematical blueprint, the shape of it, the intelligence of it, the accuracy of it, the integrity of it, everything has always been a crystal clear image that has literally rocketed into my head. And the thing is, I see the end game. So
mm,
I see exactly what it is meant to look like.
mm,
Then I have the joy of spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours reverse engineering that
right.
crystal clear picture mathematically into something that can then work when you input data.
Yeah.
So I see the end game, bang, it pops into my head. But John, hell, then I've got to build that all the way back into something that finally is keyboard ready and integrates further information.
Yeah.
This is why it's ongoing. It never stops.
Mm.
But I absolutely love it. And it's in fact, we're going to have a look at some information tonight, and we're really going to explore it and explode it in terms of a critical timeline now between now 2026 and 2036.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you like me to call up the first of the slides?
Yeah, John, absolutely. And I'm going to talk to this. I'm not going to spend a massive amount of time on each slide. I just want to use each slide for illustrative purposes.
Right. Here we go.
Okay, so this is an extract from my intelligent mathematical blueprint.
Mm.
Now, of course, I know my blueprint better than anybody else's because I work on it all the time. I am a student of me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, John, when I was talking about numbers that were whirling
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how all of a sudden they would slow down and they would all line up, either a string of sevens or nines or whatever, and then they would start to mix up again.
Yeah.
Now, John, when I saw this, I had no idea, but it was like, hold on a moment, this has to be cascading numbers,
Yeah.
right? And when I got into the work of this mathematician, this Princeton mathematician, and what he was using and how he was working with numbers, I realized that he was looking at years, then he would be looking at themes, then he would be looking at quarters, then he would be looking at months, etc., etc., etc. And I just put the slide in so that I can walk you through a very concrete example of one of the most critical moments in my entire life.
Mm.
And it revolves around a synchronization of fives.
Mm.
So if we go down and we have a look at that large number five with this red ring around it,
Oh, yes.
right. Now that is the year, which is 2021, because if you take 2021 and you add the numbers together, you get five.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, 2021 is a number five year. Now, if we go slightly up and to the right, we've got two 14 fives that are linked together by an oval red boundary. Now
Yes.
represents the sequence that themed my year in 2021. So in terms of the mathematical modeling, the output data, when I take all the variables and put them into the model, says the sequence that is theming your life in 2021 is going to be 14 5. So there's another five.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then we drill down into the quarter between, which is from April to June, and we see that that is in turn themed by a number five.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see that we are dealing with data view number one. So we rocket across, John, to where you've got that 14.5 circled in red on the right. If you
On the
can
right.
take your
Oh, yeah.
mouse there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we look there, we're dealing with the month of June. If you just take your arrow to the left, you can see we're dealing
Ah,
with
yes.
June. So there we have it, John. We have a year number five,
Mm-hmm.
a physical, an experiential sequence theming my life that year being a number five,
Mm-hmm.
drilling down into a quarter, which is powered by the number five, April to June,
Mm-hmm.
drilling down into June, which is themed by the number five. So that's four fives which have lined up, John.
Okay.
Four fives. Guess what happened in June 2021? It was one of the most significant moments of my entire life. It was when I climbed on an aircraft and left South Africa permanently to move to the UK. Not random.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
random. One of the most incredibly intense change related. The number five is always linked to change, right?
Right.
The
Okay.
greatest moment of change in my entire life lines up here. There's a case study, John. I mean, you can't get more evidence than this.
Mm.
And the thing is, when I build people's blueprints and I reverse map critical moments in their life. Don't be in the slightest bit surprised if you see alignments like this happening
Mm.
with and through one specific number.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So there you are.
Mm.
And John, we're talking 2021 now. I began this work back in 2026. I began this work back in 2017. So we're talking 9, 10 years literally.
Mm.
But here it is. What I saw way back then in terms of these numbers slowing down and one specific number lining up, almost shouting at me, this is what you need to look for. When you understand this, you're going to understand critical moments in life in terms of an alignment of code.
Mm. Mm.
And then mixing up again. Well, there it is, John. There's
Mm.
hard evidence. And this is the type of because everything here is driven with and through structures and ordered calculations, this can be repeated again and again and again and again and again.
Yes, yes.
So there is the evidence, John, of how powerful these intelligent mathematical blueprints are. And I have just been very fortunate to be able to find a way to unravel cosmic intelligence into a framework that is number related, which makes it easy for people to relate to
Mm.
when they understand how the numbers work. And then they can look at this and they can say, well, this is absolutely mind-blowing because there sitting in front of them is a case study of hard evidence.
Yeah.
And this, John, is, I believe I mean, now this might be blowing people's minds and they might be thinking, oh my goodness gracious me, what this is this is so out there. Well, hold on a moment. I think I'm only beginning to scratch the surface of the brilliance on a mathematical level that exists within each of our bespoke mathematical spiritual quotient. And when we finally really begin to unpack this on a much bigger and a much more intense level that I'm doing here, can you just imagine what this is going to mean in terms of how we will understand ourselves, how
Mm.
we will understand our journeys, how we will understand what is going on around us, how we will understand our life, our contracts, our soul contracts, our journey, and also most importantly, John, I think the most um, critical component of us, our spiritual quotient, because we are spiritual beings having a human journey.
Exactly. Yes.
Therefore, if you look at the world of business and if you walk into any C-suite of any company out there and you talk to their executives and you talk IQ and you talk EQ, these people are dialed into that space because they have been made aware of how powerful, important, and significant the space is in terms of human performance. But John, I'm yet to see anything that's really dialing into the spiritual quotient.
Mm.
And surely that is the single greatest quotient that we need to understand in order to fully understand, fully develop, and fully utilize human potential.
Yeah, yeah, because we are now in an era. I mean, this would have been less important a few decades ago, but it's becoming increasingly important now because I believe, we're at the shift of the ages, where we are starting to step back into our power. We're starting to realize that, we we've been controlled for so long. We've been in this false matrix, right? And now is our opportunity to get out of it. But to do that, we have to take responsibility for working out who we really are.
And remember, John, if we go back to, if we think about the world of work pre the 80s,
Mm.
it was all IQ driven.
Yes.
And then along came the work of Goldman.
Mm.
And on the back of Goldman's work, EQ really came to the fore. People started to really buy into it. All of a sudden, there was this enormous movement where every single executive now had to understand and develop and be aligned with and be attuned with and developing themselves on an EQ dimension. This is what is coming. This is the new EQ. This is completely the next level, this level of the spiritual quotient, the spiritual intelligence, which exists inside of every one of us. It's just that it's so difficult for people to even connect with because they need something like this in order for them to have something that they can now touch and make sense of.
mm, mm. Yeah, no, I totally get it. I worked for over 4 decades in the financial industry, and it was all about crunching numbers. It was all about, evidence and facts and figures, and the things that I'm into now wouldn't even have registered, not at
No,
all.
John. In fact, John, you probably would have been labeled as an employee that needs to be watched very carefully in terms of mental health issues.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, yeah, you would. And that's the challenge, of course, there for you, facing out to the C-suite. Having who is going to be brave enough to be able to take this to the rest of the C-suite, who is going to be able to take it to the board of directors. This is, but I think those days are coming. I do think they're coming.
Well, John, this is why I publish everything that I can on LinkedIn because that's where these people are, that's where they operate. People may not understand yet, but this is why I'm so grateful to the likes of you and for this discussion tonight, because when this is finished and produced and ready, I will go and post it on LinkedIn and maybe someone will look. But this is eventually this is going to find its way to the very top, and there are going to be companies that are going to wake up and say, hold on a moment. EQ gave us the competitive edge back in the 1980s.
Mm, mm,
What could this do for us
mm,
now? But the
mm.
thing is, it's got to be used in the right way, John, because this is incredibly powerful information. I mean,
Yes.
the stuff that I dial into on the level of mathematical blueprints, this has got to really, really be treated with a tremendous amount of care because you are really dialing into a person's life on a very, very, very bespoke and a very private level.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, me, I've I've been a big believer in your work for a long time, and the evolution that has already gone on since we dug deep into my blueprint, it's amazing. And where this was going to take us in the future is just going to be a beautiful thing, and
Well,
it's of its time.
Well, John, it is time, and I think if you wouldn't mind, John, I'm going to accelerate through to slide 3, please.
Okay.
If you could take me to slide number 3, that's 2, there's 3. Right. Now, this is what a 9D intelligent mathematical blueprint looks like now. This is where I've developed it to.
Mm,
And remember, I spoke earlier, John, about understanding numbers that would be unique to you in terms of risk, et cetera, and then being able to dial it back into the equivalent of a representation of risk in your world through, for example, red blocks within a grid.
yes.
So, what I want to show you here, John, is a snippet of evidence that I am sitting on. I am sitting on much, much, much more than this.
Mm,
But what I am seeing in so many people's intelligent mathematical blueprints, and I'm talking about collective now, right?
mhm, mhm,
So I've built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, but I'm seeing this happening over and over and over again in so many blueprints. Is this red tide of risk, of threat, of challenge, of warning
mm.
within people's bespoke blueprints from literally 2026 through to 2036.
Yeah, right.
Now, let's just look at this one here. And again, the person remains anonymous, but this is a South African business executive who I have as a client.
Hmm.
And with my clients, the way I work is every single time I have another breakthrough with my blueprint, I will update their old blueprints and let them have the latest update, etc., etc. But John, let's move beyond all the whiz bang stuff and let's just focus on this column of red
Yeah.
that exists within this person's blueprint from 2027 through to 2035. John, you do not see something like this often. This is wow.
Yeah.
What on earth am I looking at? Because this is a prolonged, if I can put it, crimson tide of red, of threat, of warning, of challenge, of adversity, struggle. It's not a pretty picture.
Mm.
Okay, that's it. It's not a pretty picture. And I think, right, so let's move on to the next slide, please, John. Here I'm looking at a UK retail data analyst whose
Hmm.
blueprint I have built. John, look at the collective chaos in her chart from 2025 through to 2032.
Mm.
Again, now hold on a moment. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but this is really interesting. This is
Mm.
really interesting. So there we've got this timeline, this what I call a deep threat timeline popping in this chart as well. Let's move on to the next one, please, John. If you can go back to 5,
There
right.
we go.
Here we've got the blueprint of Hillary Clinton. Look at how hers comes through from 2029 through to 2034.
Right.
Now, the reason I included somebody like Hillary Clinton is because I want people to understand that what I'm talking about in terms of whatever is coming, it's going to impact every single one of us.
Mm.
It's not just, the workers or a couple of people or whatever. Here's the chart of Hillary Clinton. There it is. From 2029 onwards, wow, you
Yeah.
are looking at some serious, serious adversity there, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Let's have a look at the next one, please, John. J.D. Vance. Look
Mm.
at J.D. Vance from 2025 through to 2030. Interesting, very interesting that from 2031 he's kind of, um, eases out completely, which is pretty unusual,
Mm.
right? But nevertheless, look at this period of time for him here from 25 through to 2030, a prolonged period of extreme risk, multiple challenges, what I call a crimson tide of risk.
Wow.
Right? Let's look at the next slide, please, John. Narendra Modi, the PM of India.
Hmm.
Look at his life from 2028 through to 2036. It's just
Mm.
a wall of red.
Yeah.
Now, John, I'm now talking about world leaders here. I'm not talking about you and me and maybe Susie down the road who runs the nail bar or whatever. I'm talking about world leaders here. Look at the systemic risk that is screaming alarm bells
Mm.
within the chart of Modi.
Mm. Yeah.
Right, now let's go and have a look at another one. And well, I mean, talk about being on the hot seat at the moment. But here's Keir Starmer,
Yeah.
you know. And the very interesting thing is because I understand codes so incredibly well, the year that he became prime minister, just like the year Boris Johnson became prime minister, 2019, when you understand their blueprint, it was all there. Bang.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
line of code was absolutely perfectly congruent with success for Johnson in 2019, and he became PM, which was all he'd wanted for such a long time. There it was for Starmer, bang. But look at what happens with Starmer's life from 2028 through to 2036. Now, you see, the thing is, John, there are a lot of people out there who'll be saying, hold on a moment, there's so much going on in this world right now, and you've got the world's elite and the world's top politicians, and they're never affected and never influenced by anything. It's only the little guys, the guys in the street who get smashed. They just get poorer and poorer and poorer, and the rich get richer and richer and richer, whatever. Well, John, here, and I think this is enough evidence
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have put in 20 slides, but that's just overkill.
Yeah.
Here are world leaders, John, world leaders right now who are trotting the globe. The other day you saw Modi having a chat with Netanyahu in Israel, etc., etc. These guys are the man of the moment, or the men
Mm,
of the moment, the
mm,
leaders of the moment. What on earth are we looking at
mm.
in terms of such collective chaos in their lives too?
Yeah.
Now, John, I don't know. And remember, this is where I immediately sit back because I work with data, because I work with information, because I work with maths. I like to stick to the facts and I like to present the evidence,
Mm,
right? I don't know what we are looking at, right?
mm.
Hands up. I don't know. So whatever I might say after this is postulating, could be,
Right.
might be, etc. But John, what are we looking at here? Because I do not hear these kind of conversations happening on any YouTube channel.
Mm, mm.
Right? On YouTube channels, I see an enormous amount of anger. I see anger where either people are bad mouthing the rich and the powerful and this and this and saying they're putting structures in place to basically break us down. True or not, that's what's being said. But the one thing that I do not see, and even John, the likes of, for example, young Stephen Bartlett,
Mm.
this whiz kid on the Dragon's Den, the UK Dragon's Den, who now runs the podcast Diary of a CEO.
Oh,
I
yeah.
published I published his mathematical blueprint on LinkedIn a couple of months back.
Mm.
And John, when you look at that young man's life, now he is on a trajectory like you. Everything Stephen Bartlett is doing is turning to gold.
Yeah.
Everything, right? He's probably the hottest property on the planet at the moment. Well, John, if you go and study his intelligent mathematical blueprint, it is screaming alarm bells from
Mm.
2028 onwards.
Wow.
Why? So, what are we looking at here, John? And the thing is, when I presented this evidence, you remember, John, in 2024, I started a PhD through one of the UK universities.
Yeah.
And this is what I wanted to take into a PhD. This is what I wanted to show people. This is what I wanted people to connect with. This is what I wanted groups of brilliant minds to get around me and to work with me and help me to understand what is going on, right?
Mm. Mm.
What I was met with in the world of academia was just absolute scorn and ridicule. And so I thought to myself, to hell with this. I don't need it because, in actual fact, you haven't even made an effort to try to understand how I do all of this. You've just laughed me straight out of the room, as what happened at the business school.
Mm.
But, John, this information is laser accurate. It is laser accurate. So, what is it? What is it that we, and when I say we, I'm talking we as a collective,
Yeah.
are going to experience, and it's building, John, it's already begun. It's
Yeah.
already begun. And I can see that the critical timeline for all of this, which affects every single one of us, is 2026 to 2036. Now, John, I don't know what it is, but it is real, it is coming, it is massive.
Hmm.
And I am so grateful to you and to Elevated Planet for gifting me the platform through which I can get this message out there so that people can start to wake up, even if they just listen to this and then they start watching how the world is constantly moving into a higher and higher and higher and higher level of systemic risk. If that's the only connection they make,
Yeah.
it will stick in their minds that somewhere there was this crazy guy who does crazy mathematics, who was interviewed by another crazy guy, and during their crazy chat, they triggered something in my mind, which is now taking me back to the fact that maybe they're not so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, to your point, the the years ahead, we're talking about the shift of the ages. We're talking about something that we've been waiting for thousands of years, which is unfolding now. But that is just like me talking woo-woo nonsense, right? So that's something that I acknowledge I know to be true, but I'd never, whether you regard it as truth or whether you regard it as deluded nonsense is right for you where you are on your journey. But all we ever try to do at Elevated Planet, which is why we work with the likes of you, Chris, is to create spiritual curiosity. Because at spiritual curiosity, then people will start to research it for themselves. So we never ask people to believe what we believe as this is the truth. This is our truth. This is basically what we have researched ourselves, me like 8 years onto the journey, which really isn't that long compared to many. But in 8 years, I've learned an awful lot. And I continue, and I love this journey. And, you look at the chaos in the world. I am so excited for the future because this is why we're here. We are here for the shift of the ages. And what I always say is chaos is a prerequisite for change because people are living in a cozy existence. And, if we say, okay, everything's going to change, right? And say, okay, well, I'm not going to change. I've got a nice house. We got, an education system. We got a healthcare system. Why would I change anything? And absolutely right. Why would you? So whatever is going to happen is going to be so big that people no longer have the choice of living in the comfort zone, right? Life begins where the comfort zone ends. And that is where the comfort zone is not going to be that comfortable anymore. It won't exist.
Well,
It's
you see, sorry, John,
no,
sorry
no,
to
no.
interrupt,
That's it.
but when you said we are going through one of the shifts of the ages, now that is so profound because this prolonged shift is revealing itself in absolutely every single person's blueprint.
Mm,
Now, and this is mathematics, John.
yeah.
This is mathematics. And I know my work is laser accurate, John, because I've got so much proof and evidence to support it. John, the other day we had the most fantastic event with Sir David Attenborough,
Mm,
turning 100.
yes.
I mean, what a man, what a life, what a contribution he has made to science, to understanding, to fostering inside of people a love and appreciation for nature.
Yes.
Right? John, I published his entire intelligent mathematical blueprint from birth through to age 100 on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. I did it on his birthday in order to celebrate his birthday so that somewhere out there is a record of this wonderful man's intelligent mathematical blueprint.
Mm, mm,
Right? Now, I've never met him. I would love to, but I've never met him. John, taking his information and feeding it in and doing all of these things, right? I know nothing about the man,
mm,
absolutely
mm,
nothing. And then when all of these mathematical codes hang together and the risk profile and all the little blocks get colored and coded and all of that, John, we go back to critical moments and they're all there. They are all there, life-shaping, life-changing moments. I'm not going to go into too much detail. In 1997, he experienced an intensely personal moment that carried a lot of devastation inside of it. When you go and look at his blueprint, there it is, clear as a bell. There's the sea of red in his life for
mm,
about 3 or 4 years. Obviously, as it hits this experience in 1997, and then him having to process it and then go through it. Now there it is. Now,
mm,
John, if this sits in the blueprint of someone like Sir David Attenborough,
mm.
what are we? It sits in yours. It sits in mine.
Yeah.
This means that every single one of us has a mathematical spiritual construct. It means that we are an expression of mathematics.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
the fact that everybody's mathematics is screaming, and instead of saying threat, let me say challenge. It's this red tide of challenge, of change, of adversity, of chaos. I think that's the right word, chaos. It's a red wall of chaos in people's collective charts from 2026 through to 2036. Now, John, whatever it is, people need to wake up to the fact that this is already happening now.
Yeah.
You look around you, you look at the wars, you look at the chaos, you look at what is going on, you look at the lies, you look at the deception, you look at the confusion. Nobody knows what to believe anymore. Everybody's blaming each other. You know, it's literally like someone, where they used to take the petals of a flower. He loves me not. He loves me, he loves me not. To bomb today, not to bomb today. To bomb today, not to bomb today. You know, the fear and the terror that is being injected into the system
Mm, mm,
all day, every day, non-stop. Oh, today we're going to bring about the destruction of a nation. Tomorrow we've got a peace deal.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is, John, whether we like it or not, if we have to take a big step back and we have to look at what is going on is the equivalent of collective mental persecution.
Mm,
So therefore, whatever is going on, one way or another, it is a war for the ownership of the human psyche.
yes.
It is a war for the ownership of the sovereignty of a person's mind.
Yes.
And I am so grateful. And the thing is, this is why, John, I just had to get this research out. And I hope that people who watch this send it to other people, send it to other people, send it to other people. Because here is evidence of a timeline, I believe, 2030, 2026 to 2036, during which you, me, and every other good person on this planet, right, is going to have such an assault made on them, because what the war is for this control over the sovereignty of the human mind. And the more you are assaulted with stuff, John, the less you are able to think.
Mm, yeah.
Now, the thing is, even if someone just watches this once and forgets about it, what we are looking at through this red tide of chaos in people's charts is the equivalent of a boiler room. The world is turned into a boiler room, and the temperature is going to go up and up and up. And then we'll have moments where it'll be dialed back, bits of reprieve or whatever. But then because these whatever it is that is organizing this knows what it's doing. It is highly, highly, highly organized.
Yeah.
And then the pressure will come back and the pressure will come back. But when people see this and experience this, at least they can make the connection and
Hmm.
they can say, hold on a moment, I remember that video where these guys were talking about a crimson tide over literally a decade, which was linked to the equivalent of a war being waged on the human psyche. And even if that's the only connection they make, do you know what, John? We have helped people start to bulletproof their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a war for consciousness, isn't it? And, people have a choice. They can get stuck in the fear. They can, descend down that particular cycle. And I don't blame anybody for doing that, because we've been conditioned and programmed to actually listen to the news, to listen to our politicians, to look at what the major corporations around the world are telling us and believe it as if it's true. Okay. I don't blame anybody, because 8 years ago, that was me. I've layered in so much understanding now about what life's really about. It's really about this, right? It's about going within. And once you go within, all that is just noise in the background. Now, okay, there'll be some practical realities around that as well. You're going to have to still live in the same world, but you do not get drawn into the fear. You see the solution rather than the problem, and that is where you're heading.
John, music to my ears. And one thing I would like to do, John, is if I could just go back to slide 2, please,
For
because
sure.
I want to show you a critical timeline overlap, which I think is going to be the hotspot during which so much of what we are going to experience is going to take place.
Right.
So, John, if we think about everything happening in terms of cycles of nine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right?
Yeah.
2026, as I've basically calculated over here on the left, if you add the numbers, it gives you 10, 1 and 0 gives you 1.
Hmm.
So 2026 is the beginning. It is the number one year of a cycle of 9, which goes through to 2034.
Yeah.
You can see the bold red numbers
Yeah.
over there. Now, if you take the 20 and you cancel it, because it's common to all the years in this century,
Hmm.
and you go down 28, 2 and 8 gives you 10. 2028 is the number one year in a hidden cycle of 9.
Okay.
And this hidden cycle of 9 with the bold blue numbers runs from 2028 through to 2036.
Yes.
Now, you take these two numbers, these two timelines of 9 from 2026 through to 2024, and the other one from 2028 to 2036,
Hmm.
and you look for the overlap. It is the years 2028 through to 2034.
Yes.
Now, that was appearing over and over and over again as almost the hotspot in people's charts.
Mm.
Now, the very interesting thing for me, John, is that if you look at that, that is a 7-year period,
Mm. Mm.
right? Now, people can connect the dots in which way they want. I'm just purely presenting information, and people can connect it in whatever way they wish to. But, John, why is 2028 through to 2034 in my calculations presenting as the critical hotspot during which I think the greatest intensity is going to happen in terms of this war for human consciousness, human souls, whatever you want to call it? Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And isn't it interesting, John, there's that 2028 is the next US election,
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course.
right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And then there's a bit of other information there on the slide for people that would like to kind of, dabble a little bit or maybe let their minds run a bit. But it's just so interesting, which shows us, John, that it has already begun
Mm.
and it is building. And there's a story to this, John. I am absolutely convinced, because the one thing about unpacking intelligent mathematical blueprints is they have shown me that each of us have a unique story for our lives, which has actually been placed within the architecture of our journey mathematically.
Mm.
So are we looking here at a bigger picture in terms of the mathematical journey of humanity?
Mm. I think so.
And if that is the case, then and I say if again, remember, John, I'm
Yeah.
not saying it is, I'm saying if, then I believe we are going to see 2027 and 2028 being two very extreme years in terms of a transition.
Yes.
I don't know what that transition is going to be, but if people listening to this stay awake and pay attention, should we go into a very extreme transition
Mm.
during 2027 and 2028, then we know that this rudimentary timeline architecture is dialed into a much bigger narrative, which revolves around humanity and which is themed around a 7-year timeline,
Mm.
washing out around 2036.
Mm. I believe we are going through a shift of the ages. I think this is has been prophesized, whether it's in the book of Revelation, whether it's, the Nag Hammadi texts, whether it's all these different ancient kind of things. It's all pointing to this moment in time now. And if you think about it, right, there's the precession of the equinox, which happens every 25,920 years. Okay.
Right, right.
Happens to be now. The cycle is completed now. Of course, when you're talking 25,920 years, it's kind of like not just a blink of an eye and one thing changes to the next, but you begin a new cycle. Within 25,920 years, there are two cycles. Okay. There's the cycle of spiritual development. There is a cycle of falling asleep. We're coming out of the sleep cycle and into the time of enlightenment when humanity wakes up to the fact that we are creator beings. This stuff that we've had outside of ourselves is noise, and it's designed to test you at a soul level. That's why we're here. We're being tested. But we have the power. This is all my opinion, right? So I don't ask anybody to actually believe this, but 8 years I've been researching this stuff pretty avidly. We have the power ourselves personally. We are enormously powerful, but we've been told that we're not. Once you start to uncover that, what you described to me, Chris, is part of that story. I think there's, because even in the stuff that we were talking about over these last few weeks, we were talking about, the technology of light and sacred geometry and the geometrical flux. But they always say at the same time, it comes down to numbers. These can be mathematically expressed as well as visually expressed. There are a lot of ways of doing it. It's a mathematical universe, it's a holographic universe, and we are creating our own reality. So once you start to work out what that really means, and with your intelligent mathematical blueprints, each person can have a view of where their life influences are going to be, right? I think a lot of people are due to awaken right now. It's nobody's fault if they are asleep, and I totally get it, because that's when we look like woo-woo crazy guys.
100%. Yeah.
But at the same time, by the grace of God go I. But I do believe it was always in my timeline to begin this
Yep.
journey and share information freely across anybody. Those who will be prepared to ridicule it, and those who will be prepared to actually have that little spark of curiosity which begins them on their own journey, because that's all we ask. And at the same time, we have a community full of people who kind of are on the same wavelength, and they get this stuff and they appreciate it and they add to their ideas into the journey that we're on. And I love that. So exciting times. And what you're presenting there to me, Chris, does make sense from a timeline perspective, because I think it falls right in, whether you're talking about the book of Revelation, whether you're talking about, the Mayan calendar, where, 21st of December 2012 was when that finished. But there's an 18-year cycle each side. So from 1994 through to 2030, for instance, that cycle is coming to a close on the 21st of December 2030 in reality. So we're going to have to go through an enormous amount of change if we are really truly breaking through that cycle, that precession of equinox cycle of 25,920. And it means something. And what this says is that life is so different to what we've been conditioned and programmed to believe it is. So I understand why people think they don't get their heads around this very easily, because we're asking people to all of a sudden step away from a reality that they have grown up with for decades upon decades upon decades, that have been in the education system, the religious systems have programmed them to believe a certain thing. And I believed it, that's it. And if I hadn't have had an awakening call back in May of 2018, I'd still be on that journey now. And I've got plenty of friends who are. And yeah.
Well, John, the lovely thing for me is that I love working with skeptical minds.
Mm,
And I think that is why I have always tried to take the esoteric dimension that I love so much and that I have such a tremendous interest in, and bring it back into nuts and bolts.
mm,
And it's I'll never forget um, working with a CEO from a mining company back in South Africa.
mm.
The guy contacted me and he said to me, I've heard that you do this work. I'm incredibly skeptical. The moment someone says skeptical, it's game on, because you're not dealing with a cynical mind. A cynical mind is a closed mind, that you cannot work with a closed mind.
Right.
He said, but I would like to give it a go because I have got some critically important decisions to make. how much do you charge? I told him. He said, well, quite frankly, that's a very acceptable sum for me to pay in terms of a bit more information, given how critical these decisions are. So he sent me the information. I bought him his blueprint. He came because I like to work face to face. It's much, much, much more personal.
Mm.
And when I put the blueprint down in front of him and I showed him the architecture of his life, and obviously I start young and I from birth, and I show certain things and critical moments or whatever. Now the thing is, John, I'm never in what I would call crystal ball mode, where I'm actually talking about the exact event, but
Yeah.
I'm showing the impact, whether it was positive, whether it was negative, literally the domino effect from all of that. So you're talking strategy,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And eventually the guy just rocked back in his chair and he said to me, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. He said, quite frankly, I really thought that you were, you know, a little cooked in the head, but it was a worthwhile spend in case there was something really good that's come out of it.
Mm.
And you know what it is, John? It's the fact that most people are scared.
Mm.
When people are confronted with the truth that they are so much more than
Mm.
what they imagine themselves to be,
Yeah.
when they are confronted with the truth that nothing about their arrival here on earth is random, when they are confronted with the truth that everything about their moment of origin links to an intelligent mathematical blueprint which carries inside of it all of this intelligence that causes the teeth to fall out of their face. This is when their world literally either opens up in terms of, wow, this is incredible, I'm on board, or they shut closed because it's too terrifying.
Yeah.
And the thing is, John, I believe that the way I've packaged this work, the way I present it, the way I share it, the way you and I talk about it, we are at least doing so in a way where we are entertaining and opening up lines of curiosity within skeptical minds.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, John, because the thing is, if your mind is completely shut
Mm.
to the spiritual quotient and the spiritual dimension, as we go into this timeline, this red wave of chaos, it's going to be a very, very difficult, a very brutal, a very terrifying and distressing time for you to have to navigate.
Mm. Mm.
Whereas if your mind has been slightly opened, you will realize, hold on a moment, there's a much bigger picture here. Everything is not as it seems. I need to retain my critical thinking ability. And on the back of that, John, you and I, even if it is just through that, will
Mm.
have served so many well.
Yeah. 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 And that's the thing. It's kind of it is it's a mindset. We have a choice. Every single person on the planet has a free will choice. They can
Correct.
choose to be excited about the opportunity that's being presented to them through this gift of change that they came here for, or they can choose to be terrified and then sink into that, emotional down the emotional spiral into all the things that fear brings, which is a closing down, right?
Correct.
Um, Everybody is on their own journey. And this is the interesting thing, right? Because if you did 8.2 billion intelligent mathematical blueprints for every single person in the world, no two of them would be the same. Isn't
But
that
John, the
remarkable?
one thing I will say is having built hundreds of these, I have never seen anything in people's charts on a collective level like what I am seeing now.
Mm,
And
mm,
I basically think that's it, John. I
yeah.
think that's it. That is the message. And once again, thank you to you and to Joe Lay and to Elevated Planet and to your community, for allowing me to share this research, because it really is. This is research. It's data driven. There's a massive amount of time and effort invested into this in terms of accuracy. There's a massive amount of proof backing it as well in terms of people saying, my word, I genuinely thought you were talking complete garbage, and then all of a sudden this happened. We are going into a time which is either going to ignite
Mm.
within people a quest around the spiritual consciousness, the SQ, and it's literally going to take them into a completely different dimension. Or on the back of fear and terror, they're going to stay in the dimension that we are currently in, which is a deeply dumbed down dimension.
Yeah.
And I really hope and I really pray, because I believe that most people out there are actually lovely people.
Hmm.
I really hope and pray that most people wake up and choose to elevate rather than to stay in this dumbed down dimension where, if you will, you are easy prey.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, you got 8.2 billion people on the planet. That's 8.2 billion aspects of divine consciousness right there. Every single one. Now, how people handle that is entirely their call because that's what they're here for, their individuated expression and their individuated journey, and their, individuated mathematical blueprint will show the influences. But I honor everybody's personal choices, whether they see this as truth, whether they see it as deluded nonsense, or whether they sit in the middle and get spiritually curious and start to research it for themselves, which I always encourage people to do, because I think that's the thing that makes the difference. It's not about seeing something and then automatically just fully believing it. Okay. It's about being curious. It's about then saying, okay, well, if that's true, then I need to be reading this because I think it's BS, right? This will prove it to me one way or another. So then you start to research. That's when it sinks home because that was my journey, right? To start off with, I thought it was all woo woo nonsense. Then I had it confronted with me that it wasn't. And all of a sudden, as a left brainer, I had to understand why. So then I started digging and researching. Anyway, it's been a fantastic journey. I'll, love having you as somebody who's very aligned with where Elevated Planet is going. I love the work that you do. You're a very special person here for a very special reason. And I do think this is all about awakening hearts and minds. But I honor all individuated expressions out there to make their own mind up and to decide for themselves. But Chris, thank you. Thank you, thank
Pleasure.
you, thank you to you and to Suzanne, the wonderful Suzanne, for the work that you do. And it's humanfuturist.com,
Thehumanfuturist.com. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
thehumanfuturist.com.
I call
Okay.
myself the human futurist because I love to play with numbers and patterns and codes and sequences. And if you will, look at how I can unpack future intelligence based on historical data, historical patterns, much like futurists would do, except I'm working on the people level as
Yeah.
opposed to the tech level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Great, but John, thank you. I'm always incredibly grateful, and it's always a joy for me to share my information and my research here. And thank you for today.